Laxdæla Saga, also Laxdoela Saga, Laxdoela Saga, Laxdaela Saga, or the Saga of the People of Laxárdalr, is one of the Icelanders' sagas. Written in the 13th century, it tells of people in the Breiðafjörður area of Iceland from the late 9th century to the early 11th century. The saga particularly focuses on a love triangle between Guðrún Ósvífrsdóttir, Kjartan Ólafsson, and Bolli Þorleiksson. Kjartan and Bolli grow up together as close friends, but the love they both have for Guðrún causes enmity between them and, in the end, their deaths. Second only to Njal Saga in the number of medieval manuscripts preserved. Laxdæla Saga remains popular and appreciated for its poetic beauty and pathetic sentiment. Preservation. Laxdæla Saga is preserved in numerous manuscripts. The oldest manuscript to contain the saga in its entirety is Þorleiksson dating to the mid-14th century. There are also 5 vellum fragments, the oldest dating to California, 1250, and numerous young paper manuscripts, some of which are valuable for textual criticism of the saga. Scholars have divided the manuscripts into 2 groups, the Y group, which includes Þorleiksson, and the Z group, which includes the oldest fragment. The greatest divergence between the groups is that the Y group contains an addition of 10 chapters to the saga. These chapters were not written by the original author and are regarded by scholars as a separate work. Another difference between the groups is that the theft of Kjartan's sword is narrated in 2 different ways. Most other differences between the manuscripts are minor variations in wording. Synopsis Prelude. Laxdæla Saga begins in Norway in the late 9th century as Ketilflatnes and his children leave Norway to escape the tyranny of Harald Fairhair. The saga focuses in particular on Ketil's daughter Unr the Deep-Minded. Unr leaves Norway to travel with her family to Iceland. Later in the saga, when she hears that her father and her son are dead, she has her ship built so that she can take all of her surviving kinsmen as well as a great deal of wealth to safety. Unr goes on to travel to Scotland and the Orkney and Faroe Islands before claiming lands in Breiðafjörður in western Iceland. Later in life, Unr decides to leave her wealth to Olaf, the youngest of Thorstein's children. She decided to leave her inheritance to him because he was very good-looking and likable. The saga describes Unr's dignified death and her ship burial. The next principal character is Höskuldur Daði, great-grandson of Unr. He travels to Norway to acquire wood for house building. While abroad, he purchases a mute but beautiful and expensive slave girl. He also meets King Hakon the Good, who gives him wood, as well as a ring and a sword. Höskuldur then travels back to Iceland. Höskuldur and the slave girl have a child named Olaf, later nicknamed Olaf the Peacock. One day, when Olaf is 2 years old, Höskuldur finds Olaf and his mother talking by a stream. Höskuldur tells the slave girl that she can no longer pretend to be mute and asks for her name. She reveals that she is Melkorka, daughter of King Murkjartin of Ireland, and that she was taken captive at the age of 15. Höskuldur also fights the reanimated Hrappr. This is one of the earliest textual mentions of reanimation of the physical body. Olaf the Peacock grows up to be a handsome and well-mannered man. When he is 18 years old, he travels abroad. He first goes to Norway, where he pays his respects to King Harald Greycloak and befriends his mother, Gunnhilda. When Gunnhilda learns that Olaf wants to travel to Ireland to seek his grandfather, she orders a ship to be made ready for him and gives him a crew of 60 men. Olaf sails to Ireland but ends up with his ship stranded in an unfavorable area, far from any port. Local Irishmen lay claim to all property on the ship, according to Irish law on ship strandings. Olaf, who is fluent in Irish, refuses to give up the ship. The Irish attempt to take the ship by force, but Olaf and his men successfully resist. King Kjartan happens to be nearby and arrives at the scene. Olaf tells the king that he is the son of Melkorka, his daughter, and offers him a gold ring from Melkorka as proof. Kjartan had given his daughter the ring as a teething present. As the king examines the ring, his face grows red and he acknowledges Olaf as his kinsman. Olaf and his men spend the winter with the king, fighting with him against raiders. Kjartan offers Olaf to inherit the crown, but he rejects the offer and travels back home. Olaf's journey abroad has brought him great renown and he now settles in Iceland. He marries Thorgerd, daughter of Eagleskalla Grimslan. Olaf and Thorgerd have a number of children, including the promising Kjartan. As Höskuldur dies, he gives Olaf, his illegitimate son, the ring and sword which King Haakon had given him. Olaf's half-brother, Þorleiksson, takes offense at this. In order to make peace with his brother, Olaf offers to foster Þorleiksson's son, Bolli, as he who raises the child of another is always considered as the lesser of the two. Love triangle Guðrún Ósvífrsdóttir is introduced as the most beautiful woman ever to have grown up in Iceland, and no less clever than she was good-looking. Guðrún has dreams that cause her concern. A wise kinsman interprets the dreams to mean that Guðrún will have 4 husbands. She will divorce the first one, but the other 3 will die. And indeed, Guðrún marries her first husband at the age of 15 and he turns out to be a man she cares little for. She makes him a shirt with a low-cut neck and then divorces him on the grounds that he wears women's clothes. Guðrún's second marriage is happy but short. Her husband drowns. Kjartan and Bolli grow up together as close friends. The affection between them such that both of them felt something was missing in the other's absence. Kjartan and Guðrún start spending time together and are considered a good match. Kjartan and Bolli decide to travel abroad. Guðrún is displeased by this and asks Kjartan to take her with him. Kjartan refuses, reminding Guðrún that she has responsibilities at home. He asks her to wait for him for 3 years. Guðrún refuses and they part in disagreement. Kjartan and Bolli arrive in Norway at Nidaros and learn that there has been a change of rulers. The archpagan Haakon has been killed and Olaf Tryggvason has ascended to the throne, eager to spread Christianity as widely as possible. A number of prominent Icelanders are docked at Nidaros, forbidden to put to sea because they refuse to adopt the new religion. Kjartan and Bolli resolve not to convert and Kjartan suggests burning down the king's quarters with the king inside. Eventually Kjartan warms to the king and relents and all the Icelanders at Nidaros are baptized. King Olaf makes repeated attempts at converting Iceland to Christianity but meets with resistance. He decides to hold Kjartan and several other sons of prominent Icelanders as hostages in Norway to force a conversion. Bolli, however, is allowed to go and sails home to Iceland. He tells Guðrún that Kjartan is held in high favor by King Olaf and she shouldn't expect him back in Iceland in the coming years. He also tells her, correctly, that Kjartan has become friendly with the king's sister, Ingebjorg. Bolli asks Guðrún's hand in marriage and although she is very reluctant the marriage eventually goes through. News reaches Norway that Iceland has converted and King Olaf grants Kjartan leave. Kjartan visits Ingebjorg for the last time and she gives him an embroidered headdress, saying that she hopes Guðrún Ósvífrsdóttir will enjoy winding this about her head, and that Kjartan is to give it to her as a wedding present. When Kjartan arrives in Iceland he discovers that Guðrún is already married to Bolli. When Kjartan, by coincidence, finds a beautiful woman named Hrefna trying on the headdress he tells her, "I don't think it would be a bad idea if I owned both together, the bonnet and the bonny lass." Kjartan gives Hrefna the headdress and marries her. Bolli attempts to mend his relationship with Kjartan and offers him some fine horses as a gift. Kjartan flatly refuses and hard feelings remain. In a subsequent feast, Kjartan insists that Hrefna sit in the high seat. Guthrum, used to having this honor, turns red. Later in the feast, Kjartan discovers that his sword has been stolen. It is discovered in a swamp without its scabbard, and Guthrum's brother is suspected of the theft. Kjartan is deeply rankled by the event, but his father, Olaf, persuades him that the matter is too trivial to quarrel about. At the next feast, Hrefna's headdress disappears. When Kjartan calls Bolli out on the matter, Guthrum tells him, and even if it were true, someone here was involved in the disappearance of the headdress. In my opinion, they've done nothing but take what rightfully belonged to them. Kjartan is now no longer able to withstand the insults. He gathers some men together and goes to Bolli's farm, stationing guards at all the doors of the farmhouse. He prevents everyone from exiting for 3 days and so forces them to relieve themselves indoors. Later, he further humiliates Bolli and Guthrum by preventing the sale of some land which they had intended to buy. Death and vengeance. Guthrum goads her brothers into attacking Kjartan, and they start laying plans to waylay him. Guthrum then asks Bolli to go along with them. Bolli refuses, reminding Guthrum that Olaf the Peacock had brought him up kindly and that Kjartan was his kinsman. Guthrum then tells him that she will divorce him if he does not go, and he relents. Guthrum's brothers find Kjartan with one companion and attack him while Bolli stands aside. Seeing that, despite superior numbers, they cannot overpower Kjartan, they urge Bolli to join them, pointing out that there will be dire consequences for all of them if Kjartan escapes. Bolli then draws his sword and turns toward Kjartan. Seeing that his kinsman is about to attack him, Kjartan throws away his weapon and Bolli deals him a death blow. Immediately filled with regret, Bolli holds Kjartan in his arms while he dies. Kjartan's killers are prosecuted at the local assembly, and Guthrum's brothers are exiled from Iceland. Out of affection for Bolli, Olaf the Peacock asks for him to pay a fine rather than be outlawed. Kjartan's brothers are outraged by the father's lenience and say that they will find it difficult to live in the same district as Bolli. Olaf dies 3 years after Kjartan's death. His widow, Thorgerd, then starts inciting her sons to avenge the brother. She reminds them of the great ancestors and says that their head father Eagle would most certainly not have failed to avenge a man like Kjartan. Unable to resist the mother's taunts, the brothers start planning an attack. Riding out with a party of 10, including the mother, they find Bolli and Guthrum in a shieling. A man named Helgi hardbinds and deals Bolli a heavy blow with a spear, and one of Kjartan's brothers then severs his head. Helgi wipes his spear clean on Guthrum's shawl and Guthrum smiles. Helgi remarks that his own death lies under the end of that shawl. Guthrum gives birth to a son and names him Bolli for his dead father. When Bolli is 12 years old, Guthrum shows him and his older brother the bloody garments the father was wearing when he was killed and her own bloody shawl. They start planning vengeance, and some time later Bolli, wielding his father's sword, kills Helgi. Eventually the cycle of killing and vengeance peters out, and Bolli and his brother make peace with Kjartan's brothers. Aftermath. Ólafsson travels abroad and makes a good impression on King Olaf Haraldsson in Norway. He then travels to Constantinople, where he gains renown as a member of the Varangian Guard. Guthrum marries for the 4th time, but her husband drowns. In her old age she becomes a nun and an anchorite. The last chapter of the saga relates a conversation between Bolli and Guthrum. Bolli wants to know who his mother loved the most. Guthrum responds by listing her 4 husbands and their different qualities. Bolli says that this doesn't answer his question and presses his mother on the point. Finally Guthrum says to him, "I was worst whom I loved most." Characterization. Thorstein Veblen finds certain religious references in the story to be intrusive. He notes that Kjartan comes to be depicted as a sanctimonious acolyte, given to prayer, fasting and pious verbiage, instead of being a willful spoiled child, vain and sulky, of a romantic temper and endowed with exceptional physical beauty, such as the run of the story proclaims him. Similarly, he finds it jarring that Guthrun, a beautiful vixen, passionate, headstrong, self-seeking and mendacious, is dutifully crowned with the distinction of having been the first nun and anchorite in Iceland, having meritoriously carried penance and abnegation to the outer limit of endurance. Armin Jakobsen objects to interpretations which focus on Guthrun's good looks and glamour, instead drawing attention to the emphasis the saga places on her intellect. He points out that in the account of her dream interpretation she, a 14-year-old girl, is shown as carrying on a lengthy conversation with the sage as an equal. Reception. Laxdæla saga appears to have been held in high regard in medieval Iceland as evidenced by the number of extant manuscripts. Only Njal saga is preserved in a greater number of vellum fragments. The saga's reception in modern times has also been enthusiastic. Guthbrand Vigfússon says of the saga, this, the second only in size of the Icelandic sagas, is perhaps also the second in beauty. It is the most romantic of all, full of pathetic sentiment. Similarly, Thorstein Veblen notes that the saga is conventionally regarded as a thing of poetic beauty and of high literary merit. Editions and translations. The first edition of the saga appeared in Copenhagen in 1826, along with a Latin translation. An important critical edition by Christian Calland was published in 1891. The 1934 edition by Einar Ol Svensson in the Islandsk Fornrit series is regarded as standard and usually used by translators. The saga has been translated into Latin, English, Norwegian Bokmål, Norwegian Nynorsk, Danish, Swedish, German, French, Italian, Polish, Czech, Finnish, Faroese and Japanese. There have been 6 complete English translations of the saga. Muriel Press, Laxdaela Saga, 1899. Robert Proctor, The Story of the Laxdaelas, 1903. Thorstein Veblen, The Laxdaela Saga, 1925. Margaret Arndt, The Laxdoela Saga, 1964. Magnus Magnusson and Herman Paulsen, Laxdaela Saga, 1969. Kenneva Kunz, The Saga of the People of Laxárdalr and Bolli Bollisson's Tale, first published in the Complete Sagas of Icelanders, including 49 tales, ed. by Viðarínsson al. Repr. in the Sagas of Icelanders, a selection, pp. 270–435, Repr. as The Saga of the People of Laxárdalr and Bolli Bollisson's Tale. Adaptations. William Morris, The Lovers of Guðrún, in the Earthly Paradise. F. L. Lucas, The Lovers of Guðrún, a tragedy in 5 acts, premiered at the Stockport Garrick Theatre, November, 1938. Citations.